Hey, you all, Carpetbagger here, coming to you live from the north. More specifically, we are in Bangor, Maine, and even more specifically than that, we're in front of the home of Bangor, Maine's most famous resident, Mr. Stephen King. Yes, this is the personal home of one Stephen King, the author, known mostly for his horror novels. He's written different novels. They're not also necessarily horror. He has a huge catalog of work, but probably best known for his horror novels, which have been turned into countless movies, TV shows, miniseries. I think some of the more famous ones that just come to mind, Cujo. There's about a evil dog. There is Maximum Overdrive, about some evil trucks. There is Christine, about an evil car. There is It, about an evil clown. A lot of evil lurking in his books. He's also written other books that are not horror related, actually. So made some very popular books that are not horror related, such as the Shawshank Redemption, the story that led to the making of the movie Stand By Me. So a large amount of books. He's not only known for horror, but you know, when you do say, even though he's got a huge collection of non-horror books, when you think of Stephen King, you think of horror. Carrie, that's another movie. That's another book he wrote that was turned into a movie. Carrie, they're all gonna laugh at you, Carrie. And then they dump pig's blood on her head. Okay, I'm just describing the plot of Carrie. She was telekinetic. Sorry, I'm getting scrambled, getting all over the place, because we are here at Stephen King's house. Now let's go take a closer look at the house. And there it is. Definitely could see Stephen King looking there. It's kind of fitting, and I'm sure at night this looks even spookier. And of course, when you're a man known for spookiness, you have to add a little bit of a spooky flair here. Have the gate in front of the house is a spider web. The address 47 right there, in the bodies of the spiders. Yeah, that's pretty spooky there. Also have this creepy little bat up there in front of the house. So you got just one look and you know who lives here. Over on the end here, there is another spider there. Well, I guess the K there stands for King. The king of horror, as well as King being his last name. And some sort of demonic little creature, a little three-headed Hydra type creature up there on the gate. Now also the gate to his driveway is open. Of course, there's no trespassing. We would never trespass, but makes me wonder if Stephen King is home. There actually is a car. There's a car right there. You see the car right there in the driveway. That could be Stephen King's car. I don't know. Or you know, it could be the air conditioning repairman that's just here to fix the air conditioning. Yeah, no idea if he's home. Maybe he's in there writing a new novel as we speak. I just noticed back over here that there is the string of a balloon tied to the gate. Now my guess is probably that was a red balloon, the symbol of Pennywise, the clown from It. But I wonder if they have problems with people tying red balloons to the fence. Look down here, there's a very interesting carving back there. It looks like it was carved out of a tree. Must have had a tree that died and turned it into a work of art. And look at that, it is beautiful carving there on the top. You have some birds there and the branches, and then the bottom is a bookshelf, which makes sense because Stephen King is a writer, so his books would go on a bookshelf. And you have a black cat there, maybe symbolizing the horror that lies within his books. Notice over here at the end of the fence line we have a giant frog attempting to leap over the fence. Now, Stephen King has written a lot of books. I don't know all his stories. Did he ever write a book about a giant evil frog? I mean, you know, he's kind of written, you know, so many books. I almost think that, like, by default, he's probably written about a spooky frog at some point. You know, when you write as many books as Stephen King has written, you've pretty much covered all the ground there is to cover. Kind of like, you know, they say, you know, The Simpsons did it with everything. Well, you can almost say Stephen King did it as far as anything spooky. So I'm just gonna go ahead and say, yeah, he probably has a book about a spooky frog. What's your favorite book Stephen King has written about a spooky frog? Leave a comment in the comment section. Just kidding. But actually, yeah, let me know what Stephen King books do you like? Do you like his horror books? Do you like his non-horror books? Do you like the movies? What's your favorite Stephen King story? Leave a comment in the comment section. You can actually see the house itself, a pretty major tourist attraction here in Bangor. Lots of people parking on the streets, coming to take pictures of the house. People all the way down there, yeah, just coming to pay tribute to the king of horror himself, Mr. Stephen King. So as far as my favorite Stephen King stories, honestly, I've not read a lot of his actual books. And honestly, I have not read a book in a very, very long time. I used to love to read novels. For whatever reason, I fell out of it. Probably haven't read a book in probably close to probably coming up on a decade now, which is kind of embarrassing. I would love to get back into reading. I don't know. It's a poor excuse, but you know, there's always a time crunch being on the road. Hard to keep up with reading novels. But I think I've read 2 Stephen King books. I read Bag of Bones, which my ex Christy really loved and recommended to me. Didn't care for it all that much, to be honest. However, I have read The Stand, and I loved The Stand. I read that that book is thicker than the Bible, but I actually loved it. I loved the whole thing. And not only do I love, oh, we gotta watch out behind us. There is a van creeping up on us. And you gotta be careful because Stephen King was actually notorious. Oh, here it comes. Stephen King was notoriously run over by a van, so it would be very ironic if I was run over by a van in front of Stephen King's house. Stephen King, he got run over by a van. It nearly killed him, greatly affected his physical health, and then he actually bought the van that ran over him and then personally destroyed it out of his own rage. But what was I talking about? Oh, The Stand. Yes, I loved the book The Stand. It's a post-apocalyptic book where about a virus, which I guess is that'd be really hard to well, I guess, you know, during the pandemic, that was a little close to home. I guess maybe we can reflect on it, maybe prophetic in some ways. But the book is about a virus that spread across the country, killing everyone who wasn't immune, and then the good people gravitate towards one area. I forget where the good people gravitate towards a certain town, and all the bad people gravitate towards Las Vegas. Where did that's bothering me. What town did all the good people head towards? But anyways, loved the book, but I also loved the mini-series. I don't know how many of you have seen the mini-series. It came out in the 90s. The special effects are a little dated, but that kind of makes it great. They use some you know, low budget practical effects that are pretty amazing. But the whole story, it's a great story. It's a good with special effects aside. I remember I loved it so much. I lent it to my friend who was actually a fan of Stephen King, but he watched that movie, the miniseries of The Stand, and he's like, what janky movie did you just give me? He was completely taken out of it by the bad special effects, but I still love it. Maybe when I finally get a chance to watch some TV again, I can rewatch the Stand miniseries. It's really good. It's really good. Special effects are hilarious. The storyline's actually good, and then the guy who plays the main villain, Randall Flagg, is absolutely amazing. As far as other Stephen King works, The Shining, one of my favorite movies. However, very disappointed to hear that Stephen King hated the original Stanley Kubrick version of The Shining. He hated it so much that he tried to make his own version of The Shining as a miniseries, and people did not like it. People liked the original Shining, which, you know, The Shining was an absolute classic, and then he tried to remake it with a budget miniseries that just really rubbed people the wrong way. Kind of interesting, you know, when you think about, you know, when an author becomes separated from the work that they have created, when he feels his vision had been taken from him. I think part of the heat between him and the Stanley Kubrick Shining was that Stephen King had originally written Jack Torrance as a sympathetic character. He was talking about his own demons, his own struggles with alcohol, and Stanley Kubrick just turned Jack Torrance into an absolute psychotic monster. So that's probably why Stephen King did not like Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, even though The Shining is one of the greatest movies ever made. And then, of course, you got to talk about It. Not read the book, but I've seen the miniseries a very, very long time ago, and then the new movies I thought were really good, and I think it said something for the story of It and the character of Pennywise, the evil interdimensional clown. That there's two iconic versions of Pennywise. The Tim Curry version from the original miniseries was iconic, absolutely terrified. I remember that when we were kids, I don't think any of us watched it because we were too scared, but we always like whispered about Pennywise the clown. We were like terrified in the schoolyard about this movie, this miniseries that was on regarding It, the scariest thing we could think of, an evil clown that lives in the sewers and eats children. And then the new It, with one of the Skarsgård brothers played him, that was also amazing. So you have these two iconic, you go to like horror toy stores or you know, anything that sells horror conventions, you'll see both Pennywises represented, the Tim Curry version and the new version. I don't think you see that very much in horror. With horror remakes, you almost never see, there's always a definitive version. There's, you know, the definitive, you know, the Freddy Krueger, people hated the remake. Jason, people didn't like the remake. Chucky, people didn't like the remake. But Pennywise managed to be one of the very few horror icons where both the original and the remake were both hits and both became iconic. So you have the two versions of the Pennywise clown that managed to both be iconic. That's pretty impressive. And just sitting here in front of the house thinking, there's so many stories that it's like once you keep thinking of Stephen King movies, you're like, oh, he wrote that one too, he wrote this one, you know, like he wrote Carrie, he wrote Cujo, he wrote The Shining. You know, it's all these different stories. It just really starts to add up when you think about all these different movies, both scary and otherwise. Occasionally there's like, you know, like I mentioned, like Stand By Me or the Shawshank Redemption movies that have nothing to do with horror that are also classics. So yeah, really you can't take anything away from the man. You know, I think maybe some of his work is a little uneven. You know, I know some of his books have been, you know, derided, not as popular, but you know, overall as a body of work, you know, he can't be denied. He's done so much. And matter of fact, just to see how much his name value carried him alone, he actually at one point started releasing works as another under a pen name to see if he could still get acclaim. And it was funny because he actually not only did he get acclaim, but people were saying that his pen name was a better version of Stephen King. They actually knocked the original Stephen King while complimenting his pen name that he was going under. But yeah, so cool seeing this. Brings back a lot of memories of a lot of great movies and some good books. And yeah, so I figure we're here in Bangor. And the thing about Bangor, I'm trying to say it right. I was corrected yesterday. People say it's Bangor, which is ironic because Stephen King, known to be a little gory. So Bangor is fitting. So Bangor is the town that Stephen King based the fictional town of Derry, Maine on. Derry, used in several of his stories. Most notably, it was the setting for the book It, and the movies It. The book, the movie, the miniseries It, all set in Derry, Maine, based here on Bangor. And there's really no questioning that Bangor is based on Derry. In fact, Stephen King himself bluntly said, Derry is Bangor. So, you know, sometimes authors like to blur the lines on what they're basing things on. Like Andy Griffith was always never confirmed whether Mount Airy was the basis for Mayberry, but Stephen King bluntly stated that Bangor is the setting of It. Derry is a stand-in for Bangor. So I thought, since we're here in Bangor, we would go around town here and maybe see some other Stephen King sites. So please, follow me. We come down here just a short walk from Stephen King's house here to the Bangor Standpipe. This is actually a water tower. This was built in the 1890s as you know, water towers create pressure in the local water system. But Stephen King apparently would walk down to this park and sit on a bench. I don't see a bench currently, so the bench may be gone. But Stephen King would come down here, sit on a bench, and he would write. He would write his stories, think, come up with ideas, and it is said that this water tower, this standpipe, was the inspiration for It. So yeah, you could actually used to be able to go inside the standpipe. There's a door at the bottom. You could go take it up to the viewing area at the top and look out on Bangor from the viewing area. Unfortunately, in the 1940s, there was several children that climbed up into the top and ended up drowning in the water tank at the top of the standpipe, which very well may have inspired the story of It, written by Stephen King. Now, in all versions of the story, you know, Pennywise lives in the sewers and pulls kids down into the sewers. But as I said, Stephen King would come to this park. He would write down ideas and write some of his stories. And looking at the standpipe very well may have led him to create the It stories. In the original novel, now this is a scene that does not appear in the movie or the miniseries, but in the original novel, the character Stan goes into the standpipe and encounters Pennywise, who appears to him in the form of drowned children. Now Pennywise, usually portrayed as a clown, that's his default form, but he also would transform or morph into anything that would scare children. So he'd morph into their personal fears because he feasts off the fears of children. So Pennywise appeared to Stan as the drowned children in order to terrify him. Like I said, this scene was not filmed for either the miniseries or the movies, but they did include the standpipe in the movie. Now, it wasn't filmed here because none of the movie was actually filmed here in Bangor. They filmed it mostly in Canada, but they actually took a digital CGI version of the standpipe and inserted it into the movie. Now, it doesn't look exactly the same, but when you look at it, you can definitely see that it was based off this very standpipe. And you can kind of see how this could have inspired Stephen King. It is kind of an ominous and strange and unusual towering structure. Yeah, this is the door here that used to be able to enter before they closed it to the public after the accident with the children. You can see there it was erected in 1897 and can contain 1,750,000 gallons of water. Now here's an interesting little tidbit about the tower. It says that the tower was designed by Ashley B. Tower. So the tower was designed by someone named Tower. I wonder when Ashley was born if they knew that creating towers was their destiny, because their last name was Tower. So we're taking just a short walk from the Standpipe and just a few blocks from Stephen King's home over here to Jackson Street. Now Jackson Street was the street and it that Bill and Georgie lived on. So Stephen King apparently going for walks, walked down to the Standpipe, and as he would walk, he would think of stories and see things that would inspire him. And here on Jackson Street, we can see something that greatly inspired Stephen King, and that is this storm drain right here. Now this doesn't look like the storm drain from the movie or the miniseries, but Stephen King walked along here on Jackson Street and came across this storm drain, and that gave him the idea for probably the most iconic scene in It, and that is where It suckers in Georgie from the sewer. Georgie sees the clown coming out from the sewer, he lures him in and devours him. So the little boat would be washing down Jackson Street, and of course in the film it is called Jackson Street, and then the boat would end up here in the hands of Pennywise in the drain. It says something, definitely says something. Stephen King walking down the beautiful streets of Bangor, and he sees this open storm drain, and he says, you know what if there was an evil clown down there? And you can definitely see, while it doesn't look like the one in the movie, it's got pretty big holes in it. So this is kind of, definitely could see how someone could see this and think of that terrifying image of someone or something lurking down there, able to like reach out and grab you from those holes. So yeah, probably the most iconic scene in It, all sprung from this one little storm drain here in Bangor, Maine. We've come down here to the Cross Center. This is actually, I was here yesterday for the state fair, but there's out in front, there's something that ties in to the movie It. Because out here in front of the Cross Center, we have the mascot of the town of Bangor, Mr. Paul Bunyan, this iconic Paul Bunyan statue here. Now those of you who follow my channel know that I'm a huge fan of Paul Bunyan and the legend of Paul Bunyan. I traveled all through Minnesota to try to see all the different Paul Bunyan statues. There's quite a few in Michigan as well, but Maine, if you follow the Paul Bunyan lore, Maine is actually where Paul Bunyan was born. He later traveled to the woods of Minnesota, but was actually born here in Maine, and we have a very impressive Paul Bunyan statue here. But this Paul Bunyan was featured in the movie It. It actually attacked the character Richie. He was standing here in front of the Paul Bunyan statue, and actually in the movie it takes place in a park. It's not, the location is completely different, but it is a almost identical replica to the original statue. Again, they didn't film any of it actually in Bangor, but they recreated this statue to use for the movie. And of course the statue is controlled by it possesses the statue, and it attacks Richie. Goes on a rampage. It screams, and like birds or bats fly out of its mouth. It like attacks him with the axe and that logging tool right there. And for me, that was a big deal to be able to see in a horror movie, to see a Bunyan, a fiberglass Bunyan statue actually attack somebody. Really kind of tied in to me and the things that I am passionate about. And then also Pennywise the clown would appear on the shoulder of Paul Bunyan and leap off using balloons as a parachute. A very iconic shot in the film. Now he's on a pedestal there, so we can't really compare how tall I am to Paul here, but a mighty tall Bunyan, if I say so myself. I know this is some sort of logging tool. If anyone knows what the name of this logging tool is, leave a comment in the comments section. Yeah, always love seeing Paul. We've come down here to the downtown Main Street area of Bangor, aka Derry, the town haunted by an evil interdimensional clown. And down here we have Gerald Winters and Sons Rare Books. Now apparently this is the spot to go for first edition Stephen King books. So this is like a mecca for people who love the Stephen King books. I want to get their hands on those early editions. Looks like it's an old, used to be a shoe store at some point. But look at this, their welcome mat is the carpet from The Shining. And we see the bloody handprints on the door. Unfortunately, they are not open today. As the filming of this video, they are closed for the day. Look in, you see the Shining movie poster. Got some macabre t-shirts there as well. And in the window display here we see another scene from It. I think this was chapter 2, where they had to pick the doors. Pennywise played a mind game. They had to pick a door that said either scary, very scary, or not scary at all. And he was playing mind games the whole time. He was trying to trick them into opening the scariest door. But we've got Georgie there. He's got his arm torn off from Pennywise with that trademark red balloon floating over top. And there's his little boat that washed to the storm drain that we saw earlier today, where Pennywise was able to snatch him. This isn't necessarily Stephen King related, but we have the Red Rabbit Bazaar up there with a creepy rabbit man glaring out the window. Over here on this wall, we have a mural of Paul Bunyan in the style of the original Uncle Sam posters. He says, Bangor wants you, calling all creative people. So Paul Bunyan trying to recruit creative people to come to Bangor. Down this street you can see all these umbrellas floating over top the street, because we all float. We all float down here. I don't know, this old church here just looks like something that would be in a Stephen King movie. Third boxcar, midnight train. Destination Bangor, Maine. Old worn out suit and shoes. I don't pay no union dues. You can see the different sights to see placed in the different letters of Bangor. Although not a single evil clown in any one of these letters. Also, why does everyone in Bangor drive the same blue car? So very interesting how the town of Bangor so deeply inspired the town of Derry in the movie It, in the book It, and the miniseries It. By the way, it's hard to talk about It without coming off as unclear. I keep saying, you know, this is where It was filmed, but I'm meaning It. The movie's name is It. I'm not saying It like the movie's an It. It's been difficult. It's been a struggle all day. But yeah, the town of Bangor is the town of Derry in It, and you know the town is a huge part of the movie. That town is almost like a character in itself. The Pennywise, the evil entity, the evil clown kind of possesses the town itself, kind of uses the town as its own personal feeding ground. And interesting how even though they did not film it here, that they still used things. They used replicas from the town of Bangor in It. They used a CGI replica of the Standpipe, and they built a fiberglass replica of the iconic Paul Bunyan when filming scenes here. It kind of makes you wonder, why did they just film here? But you know, that never happens in movies. Where I'm trying to think, I think there is. Oh, I'm thinking like filming locations that actually take place where they're portraying. There's not a whole lot. I know Breaking Bad is one of the few that actually is filmed where it takes place. If you know any others, anything that's filmed that actually is filmed where, you know, at the actual location. Where it takes place. I'm thinking the movie Monster, starring Eileen Wuornos, about the female. The Monster about Eileen Wuornos, was starring. I can't think of what her name is now, but the movie Monster about Eileen Wuornos, the serial killer, was actually filmed in Florida, where. Using some of the same locations that Eileen hung out in. So very rare. If you know any other places where things were filmed and took place, leave a comment in the comment section. But even though It was not filmed here in Bangor, there was a Stephen King movie that partially was filmed in Bangor. So we're gonna drive over there and add that on to our Stephen King tour today. We've come out here to Mount Hope Cemetery here in Bangor, Maine, and this was actually a filming location for a Stephen King movie, Pet Sematary. This was not the pet cemetery, not the titular pet cemetery, but a human cemetery that was shown in the movie. Oh, looks like we just missed the SK tours, the Stephen King tours. You see the tour bus leaving the cemetery. It says Pennywise on the back. Oh my goodness. As the Stephen King tour bus was pulling away, this one woman started shrieking at them. She yelled, "This is an effing cemetery. This is not an effing tourist attraction." And wow, I don't know if screaming the F word in a cemetery is very respectful either, but you know, it does. You know, I will withhold judgment because I don't know. You know, you don't know what her story is. You know, she may have come out here to see a family member and did not like that there was, you know, a tour group in the graveyard, you know, not necessarily tromping on graves, but you know, a large congregation of people here because they're fans of a horror movie. You know, and I understand that to some degree, but I'll you know, put this out to you guys if you would like to leave a comment. What is, as far as visiting cemeteries, you know, is it disrespectful? Is it straight up disrespectful? Is it depend? You know, I don't go to cemeteries all the time, but I've shown plenty of cemeteries in these videos. So, you know, I'm guilty as anyone else of visiting cemeteries. I just always felt like it just depends on how you act and how you treat the cemetery. You know, obviously you can go into a cemetery, you can show a grave marker, but you do try to do it with respect. You know, you don't want to, like, you know, twerk on someone's grave for TikTok or anything. You know, I guess it's complicated. You know, I can definitely see how someone coming out to a cemetery to visit a loved one could be offended, seeing that the graveyard is being used as a tourist attraction. And also, you know, they filmed the movie here in the cemetery. Is that disrespectful? You know, featuring real people's graves in the movie. I don't know. I don't know where I fall on that personally. You know, it doesn't offend me personally, but you know, I've not necessarily walked in their shoes. I don't know what they've been through and how, you know, their life events may have affected how they feel. It's interesting, and like I said, leave a comment in the comment section. I think that's an interesting discussion to be had. But let's take a look around Mount Hope Cemetery, where Pet Sematary was filmed. So Pet Sematary is about a ancient Native American burial ground, where if anything is buried there, animal or human, it will come back to life, but as a darker, evil form of its original incarnation. And initially a cat is run over and buried there, and comes back as an evil cat. But later in the movie, the main character attempts to bury his son, who was deceased. They got run over by a truck. And so he comes to this graveyard to disinter him and place him in the Native American burial ground, which would cause him to be brought back to life, but as a evil form of himself. But earlier in the movie, there is another funeral that takes place in this cemetery, and Stephen King himself makes a cameo. And he plays a priest giving a sermon at a funeral, and he stands right here. Right here is where Stephen King stands in the movie. You can match up the gravestones and see that this is the spot right here that that he stood at to complete the funeral. Interesting, you know. It is interesting that the one scene filmed in the town he lived in actually included him. It must have, I just wonder if he just didn't want to travel very far for his scene in the movie and had everyone else come to him. Now there are other filming locations in neighboring towns, but the cemetery is here in Bangor. And Stephen King stood right there. It looks like maybe an unfortunate coincidence over here, because people come out to see right there where Stephen King stood as a preacher in the film. But then right by this area, so tourists come out to see this area, there just so happens to be the grave of a dead child that says Georgie on it. And you can see the tourists there, the Stephen King tourists leave pennies there on Georgie's grave. Georgie, of course, a child that was killed by Pennywise in the It movie, but this is obviously not the same Georgie. This is a child that was passed away in 1865, and presumably not from being consumed by a evil clown or evil entity. But yeah, Stephen King standing right there, this close to little Georgie's grave. Now there's a later scene in the film where the grieving father, he makes the decision that he's going to dig up his recently deceased son and bury him in the ancient Native American burial ground so that he will come back to life. And he pulls his car up along this fence, parks there, throws his tools over the fence, climbs over the fence, and then heads up this hill here. It was in this empty spot right here the little boy Gage, his grave would have been. Of course, they did not put a real grave in the ground, but they used a prop tombstone that was planted right there along this trail. There's only one film that I know of that actually just left a prop grave in a cemetery, and that was the film Rocky Balboa, the more modern Rocky movie, where he actually goes to Adrian's grave in the movie because she has passed away, and the grave's still there. You can go visit, go to the cemetery where the scene was filmed, and they just have Adrian's grave, and no one's buried there. It's just Adrian Balboa's grave. So I didn't really get into watching horror movies until I was an adult, but I remember Pet Sematary. I didn't see Pet Sematary as a child, but I saw the commercials, and I remember to this day that image of the cat with the glowing eyes hissing. That, for whatever reason, that scared me beyond belief. When I saw that commercial, I was like, this was the scariest movie I have ever heard of. Pet Sematary, with that gray hissing cat. I still burned into my brain. And now I think about it, like, that's a lot of Stephen King stuff. That's how it was when I was a kid. You know, we whispered about it. We thought it was the scariest thing around. And I know my own children. I remember both of them being terrified of it. That is just, I don't know, that's like a legacy of just terrifying generations after generations. Both my kids, like, honest to God, both my kids who are 10 years apart in age, there has been nights when they experienced with both of them where there was nights they would not go to sleep because they were just thinking about it. Like, just in their heads, were so terrified of the thought of this clown that they could not sleep. And yeah, I remember I was a little, maybe a little older than that when I was a kid and the miniseries came out. But and by the way, I didn't let my kids watch the movie, but I think James snuck and watched it. And I think that's why he was terrified. Annabelle just heard about it, just heard at kids' school talking about it, and then I actually remember we were at the dinner table, and she says, "So what is it?" And then James, without skipping a beat, as he takes a bite of his food, he said, "Oh, it's a evil clown that lives in the sewers and eats children." And I saw the life sink out of Annabelle's eyes. That was like, she asked a question, "What's it?" And she got possibly the most horrifying answer she could have ever hoped for. So, well, James had trouble sleeping when he was a kid because he watched it, snuck up and watched it. Annabelle could not sleep at night because she had just been told about it. And I remember, yeah, I remember whispers on the playground about how terrifying it was, and I was too scared. I was too scared to watch it. I didn't want to see that when I was a kid. But then I also remember Pet Sematary, just those commercials. The commercials, like, I don't know. There's commercials that literally could stop me from sleeping at night. That the Pet Sematary commercials. Anyone else have any like strong memories of that commercial? Is it just me that saw that hissing cat and was just terrified beyond belief as a child? It's funny. I think some of the scariest horror memories are just the commercials that I remember. So I've said this before. I don't know that it's necessarily true in all cases, but sometimes I said, I think I like horror movie commercials better than horror movies. They're like so like they're so creepy because they never. I guess the commercial ends. It never has to reveal anything. It never has to come to any conclusion. It just ramps up terror the entire time. So I'm a huge fan I used to be terrified of them, but I'm a huge fan of horror movie commercials. I think I could just go on YouTube and watch horror movie commercials all night long. Now this is very interesting. Here you have the grave of Annie and Captain French. And in their grave there is a reef embedded. First I was wondering if this was a hair reef, but it's actually, you can see it's made of beads. It's behind this pane of glass there. And they passed away in the 1880s. So what if this reef dates all the way back to then? That's pretty fascinating. Now this here, kind of sad. It's just the stone in the middle says Children's Home. And on the outside, I guess you see the names of children from the children's home. I wonder if these were, you know, poor children that their parents could not take care of them. But there's also it's a very large plot, so I'm not going to speculate, but I guess the possibility is there could be more children buried in there. That's pretty sad. So thank you for coming along as we visit some of the Stephen King locations here in Bangor, Maine. And I think just today, just traveling all these spots, I've just been thinking of all the different Stephen King's movies. Even if I haven't seen them, the ones that have like just burned into pop culture, it's really amazing like how many of these stories that he's created, these movies that have been created from his work. It's almost, I think almost everyone out there probably has at least one Stephen King movie that they love, or it's been a part of their life. Now, you don't necessarily have to love everything he did, and there's maybe some things he wrote in certain books that may be questionable, that you look back and you're like, why would a human being write that? But at the same time, you can acknowledge the massive contributions that he's made towards pop culture. It really kind of blows me away when I think about all the different movies, and especially horror movies. Like, seems like almost every horror movie that I remember from growing up was some way connected to Stephen King. But thank you guys so much. If you like these videos, please subscribe. I travel around the country. I film roadside attractions, amusement parks, museums, haunted houses, and other fun stuff. If you would like to help support the channel, consider contributing to Patreon. $3 or more will get you a postcard once a month from me to you. Also selling enamel pins in the Etsy shop, as well as doing cameos, personalized messages, greetings, doing birthdays, anniversaries, any occasion you'd like. And if you're interested in that, all the information is in the description of this video. And of course, all those things help keep this train on the track, this boat on the water, and this single red balloon floating to the sky. Till next time, my friends, this one's in the bag of bones.